Good morning and welcome back. We've got a whole slate of content this morning. I hope that you are bright-eyed and ready to get going. Had a pleasant evening last night as well. We're happy to see you back here this morning. We're going to be kicking off with Rory Duncan and a panel talking about high-value partnering. Kelly Morgan is going to be immediately after that, looking at speed versus scale. And then we're going to be moving on to co-location after that. So a whole slate of interesting topics. We'll be right here. Let me kick it off with Rory, and we'll get things going.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everybody. How are we this morning? Good? Fine. You know, the secret is day 2 is the best day. So thank you for coming in. We have some awesome content today, as Eric said. Here's my clicker. And for those of you who are particularly interested in the service provider side of things and how to work with service providers and channel partners, this is a good morning to come and sit here and listen to some of the content. Okay. Did any of you experience the eclipse recently? How many of you were lucky enough to do that? A few of you. Great. What did you think? Amazing? Incredible? Yeah. I think the last time I saw an eclipse was in London, probably in 1999 or 2000. It wasn't quite a full eclipse, but I think back at that time, there was a little bit of hysteria about what eclipses mean. I think at that point, people were thinking it would get so dark, you know, birds would fall from the sky because they would fall asleep, you know, airplanes, systems would fail, and so on. And I think that's the thing about eclipses. For many years, and particularly in ancient times, they were always seen as, you know, harbingers of change, or perhaps a potential disaster. And they do create this kind of uncertainty and sort of fear. However, in fact, an eclipse can be seen in many ways as a sign of a new beginning, a sign of growth, and a sign of opportunity. It's the union of the sun and the moon together that symbolizes that, and that's something that many ancient civilizations have recognized. And in many ways, that's why I'm standing here today. It's to talk about how the sell with model, as a business model, can help the channel partners and the ecosystem for distribution join together to create growth and new opportunities. So I'm going to cover that today, looking at the opportunities for sell with as a business model. I will suggest some strategies that you might want to consider, and then follow up with a panel discussion from some esteemed partners down here. Okay. Those of you who follow the IT market, have been in the business for many years, know that the role of the distribution channel is changing. Let's say the holy trinity of the distributor, the systems integrator, and the value-added reseller have been around for many, many years and forms a vital part of distribution for anything apart from direct to end-user sales. Sell with is already happening in this channel, right? So this is not something new. Companies like SHI, CDW, and West Coast are already building cloud businesses that are quite significant. Arrow, this year alone, is predicting a $1 billion business for its cloud business. That's quite significant. HNA, a large Chinese company, spent $6 billion purchasing Ingram Micro, $6 billion. Effectively now, HNA has a global distribution channel with logistics and channel capabilities that take it all the way through to things like cloud application management and provisioning from the Ensign portfolio. That's a massive, massive company. But it doesn't stop there. Systems integrators like ClearScale, Logicalis, Greenlight, and others are taking their role as a systems integrator to a service integrator level, building in regional capabilities in Latin America and Asia Pacific, building in cloud services and packaging cloud capabilities together to create new forms. And let's not forget the VAR, the long-time companion of the distributor. Companies like Champion, Storm Technologies, Mobius, and others are already building cloud businesses that combine products and services to create new forms. And this is not something that's randomly happening, okay? This is something that we see as a gradual change as cloud has moved from what we see as phase 1, the on-demand infrastructure phase, through to phase 2, which is about the management of cloud environments. Effectively, what we're seeing as sell with emerges as a viable alternative to sell through is something that's quite significant when it comes to the technology discussion. It's not only what is sold, it's how cloud is sold that's important. And it's how cloud is sold and consumed that is going to be increasingly relevant to customers, to partners, and to vendors as we go on. Let's talk a little bit about sell-through. Does everybody know what I mean when we talk about sell-through? Raise your hands if you don't. I'm going to talk about it anyway, so it's probably a rhetorical question. But sell-through, right, is something that I guess I talked a lot about the last and the only last time I was in Las Vegas, which was 14 years ago with myself and 15,000 other IBM software salespeople. Yeah, that was something to remember. But I think the point about sell-through is often, it's primarily a transactional business model, right? Hardware, software, services sold through the channel to the distributor, to the reseller, systems integrator, to the customer. It's not really a value-add model. It's primarily margins-based. And this is how stuff has been sold in the channel for many years. It's a case that it can be a little bit hit and miss, particularly in the cloud era when there's so many different things that we can sell through the channel. Also for the partners and the customers, it can also be a little bit hit and miss. It's a quick and dirty way of selling things. Sell with is different, and this is the core of my argument here. Sell with is collaborative. It's not so easy. It's a consultative sale. But the point about sell with, it adds value, right? It adds value, but not in a linear way. It adds value at multiple points in the ecosystem, with the distributor, with the VAR, with the SI, the managed services provider, ISV, and so on. And it does so through solution creation. We often talk about, oh yeah, solutions, just sell the solution through the channel. That's missing the point entirely. Adding value can be done in many different ways, and it's not purely about margin-based. Adding value creates opportunities for training and so on, for integration, for vertical-specific opportunities. The point being that it's something that is much more oriented towards business outcomes, and that's a good thing. Okay, so to summarize that, how is sell with better? Well, sell with actually is a much better way to address the business needs of an ecosystem. Sell with is a long-term, value-add, consultative model that provides differentiation to solutions. And if you think about any discussion you've had with customers about what they're looking for in terms of the long-term needs of their business, these are the things that start ticking the box. Sell with, effectively, allows us to monetize cloud services much better by addressing their business requirements, not just the technical requirements. Which is why, as I said at the beginning, sell with, we think, is a channel sweet spot for cloud phase 2 as we move from discussions about construction to management and to consumption. The combination of the three, the distributor, the systems integrator, the value-added reseller, with the service provider, is creating this union of the sun and the moon to create new growth and new opportunities. The distributor becoming the platform for cloud, the systems integrator becoming the service integrator, connecting the dots, and the VAR taking over installation, migration, management capabilities, including physical devices and so on, as well as professional services. This is the sweet spot. When we talk about sell with, it's all about the management of cloud consumption. It's how do we get more people using cloud which related to the business needs of the organization. Okay. Are you with me so far? Should I continue? Okay, I've seen at least 3 nods of the head, so I shall continue. That was my bar, by the way. If there was 2, I probably would have walked off. Okay, so what are end users saying? So I'm just going to show you a few charts, some of which you may have seen yesterday. I guess you were here for Melanie's keynote in the morning? Yeah, you would have been. Fine. Okay, so this sounds theoretical, right? Some of it may be common sense, but I wanted to reflect back on some of our core primary research from our Voice of the Enterprise, including research from Melanie herself, who you saw, my colleague Liam Eagle, and others who are here that you may have already met. So we know that customers and companies are managing their IT in different ways. There's no one way to manage cloud. There's no one way to provide it. And in fact, what we found was that when we asked them about the type of clouds they were using, just about half are, in fact, using some kind of multi-cloud approach. They're already doing this. How they manage this is a key, of course. How they manage all these clouds. What do they do with them? And of course, when we asked them what they were going to be doing in the future, we found that not only were they moving away from buying solitary, siloed clouds that were unmanaged, they were looking to have managed unbundled solutions as purchased. And why were they doing this? It's because they don't just want operational management, which of course is something that we all know comes from the managed services space, but they want security services, they want disaster recovery, they want backup and more. And this is something that's a long-term sustained trend that we see. But not only that, I should press this properly, shouldn't I? Not only that, the assumption that they're going to be bought from vendors or pure service providers is also something that we were keen to find out. The channel partner is as important as the service provider. As you can see here, if you combine those together, you're going to get a really strong winning combination. So, sell with. Interestingly, the theories I had at the beginning about the attributes and the advantages of sell with happen to be, strangely enough, luckily enough probably, are the same attributes that are highly valued by enterprise customers. The same things that companies want to use. So they want things that will help them manage cloud, they want things that will help them migrate, they want consulting capabilities and the ability to build. Again, these are the high value attributes. These are the things that are about business outcomes. Management, migration, consulting. The capability of getting more people consuming cloud. Okay, so that's just 4 charts there. There are many, many others. For those of you who haven't looked at the Voice of the Enterprise products, I would encourage you to do so. Let's talk about strategies to consider. So, these are not prescriptive. Some of you may already be doing these. Some of you may have thought about doing them. I really just wanted to kind of tease out some examples. And there are many others. These are just 4, okay? So, first of all, develop solutions, but avoid dependencies. So if we're talking about solutioning, proper solutions. So do look for best of breed. Do look for business alignment. But importantly, do explore regional and local markets. As you can tell, I'm not from around here. Most of the research that I've done is focused on EMEA. There's a huge opportunity in regional markets outside of the US for all of this. Companies like Also in the Nordic region, Eshgro, Synex Corporation and others are already doing this. They're developing value-add cloud-based solutions with numerous partner organizations. At the same time, there are a few pitfalls. If you're doing development work, be careful of not burning through your cash, particularly if you've got larger partners. Time to market versus development is a key when it comes to this solutioning. And we've seen a number of companies fall foul of that, including companies like 2E2 on the distribution side and Outsourcery and others. So that's one, develop solutions but avoid dependencies. The second one is, I guess, spread the risk. That may seem to be in opposition to what I said before, but I think there's a balance of commercial and non-commercial relationships to be had. Not everything has to be highly strategic or long-term, but you can provide specialized relationships and partnering. Tactical capabilities will provide short-term non-binding. And I think probably the most important one that we tend to undervalue these days are some of the opportunistic ones that you can have with the channel. Ad hoc, third party, marketplaces, let's say community-based solutioning, and sharing is extremely important. We've seen the rise of something like Cloud 28 Plus, for example, following this model. It's not transactional, it's not standard, but it allows companies to come together and provide solutions where they would perhaps not have been able to do so before. Number 3, move up the value chain, not down. What do I mean by that? So if we're looking at channel partners, they have 3 strong attributes. Fulfillment, right, the basic function. Packaging, bring things together. The smallest bit that's often undervalued is the add part, the value add. It's difficult for channel partners to do this. My suggestion is to complement what they're already doing as a service provider or another one. So move up the value chain. From fulfillment, look at workload migration as a complementary solution. When it comes to packaging, look at managed services as a complementary solution. And on the value add side, look at professional services. I know some of you may already do the bottom 2. I talked with a company yesterday who were considering looking at professional services. Here's a model. It complements and provides value to both parties on either side, the channel partners and the service providers. Last but not least, consider vertical or specialist solutions. And that's not to say choose something that is so emerging that you don't have a market for it, but there are many opportunities here. When it comes to industry verticals, you have some strong advantages when you're providing solutions with channel partners. You have great attach rates, and you often have strong defined requirements for regulatory environments. Companies like UK Cloud, for example, have a very strong position in the UK public sector through certification from the UK government's G Cloud. That's what they're known for. They have carved out a market for themselves. Has anybody heard of a French service provider called Grita? No, I wouldn't have expected you to. You may have heard of Clarinet. Okay, there's a one nod of the head there. So, Clarinet bought Grita. Why did they do that? Well, Grita are the only company in France certified by the French government to provide any form of hosting to the healthcare industry. So, buy Grita, acquire an entire market that is sewn up. The other hand, if you look at specialist or targeted options, you have much higher margins, less competition. Let's look at a company like Archivum. They provide digital archiving from art galleries, from museums. The Tate Gallery in London, for instance, they have an entire digital replica of everything they have underground in a big vault. Or companies like BitTitan, who've decided to focus on providing a specific platform for MSP enablement. It's a very focused approach, but for a very specific reason. Okay, so those are 4. I'm sure you guys probably have others you could bring in here, but those are the 4 I thought I would share with you. And before I bring up the panelists, I just have 3 takeaways for you to remember, if possible. Why sell with? Why is that important? First, it adds value beyond the pure transactional. And secondly, it enables cloud consumption beyond construction and the management of that construction to enable more construction. And then thirdly, it creates new ways to monetize opportunities. It adds value at multiple points in the ecosystem and therefore benefits customers and partners and technology vendors at the same time. There are probably many other, but those are the 3 that I would suggest to take away. And I'd like to thank you for listening to the first part of this session. Fine, so now we have the panel discussion, and I would like to invite up onto stage Xavier Poisson-Goyu-Bouchon. I think I actually pronounced that quite well. Yeah, okay. He'll tell me otherwise, I'm sure. Caroline Payne, Sales Director, Service Providers OnApp, as well as Dan Haven, Senior VP Worldwide Sales at Ormuco. We welcome them on stage, please. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So take a seat, and we can get started. So what I'd like to do is just ask these 3 some questions, and it's quite important because each of our guests this morning have had some specific experience in a number of the areas that I brought up. In many ways, they've kind of pioneered some of the approaches that I've mentioned. So I thought it would be great for them to share with you their experience, and then we can, you get a chance to ask some questions, okay? So, Dan. The reason I ask you first is because there's some kind of a more relevant, immediate experience that you've had working in the channel with some of the partners I mentioned here, and also in the ways of selling that I've outlined this morning. What are some of the success factors that you've seen working with some of these partners? What kind of things would you recommend?
So it's important to note that we're going through the biggest paradigm shift in the history of our space in compute. And this cloud thing, it's also important to kind of give it a definition. Cloud is not a destination. It is a new delivery model. And the toothpaste is out of the tube on that new delivery model, and that the end user knows now how they want to consume their compute. And that is now going to rearrange the entire landscape of our space. And some companies, to your question, I love to tell stories of smart companies. We found a company called Also, actually through the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Cloud 28 program. And Also recognized this shift and recognized they needed to make some changes aggressively. So what they've done is they've addressed this cloud thing and recognized there's a massive migration to the hyperscaler. Now, not all workloads can go to a hyperscaler. They're seeing that as the opportunity for their entire segment of value-added resellers and managed hosters that get serviced by them. So they have actually stood up in one country and will continue to travel across. They're going to put up in a total of 12, but they're up shop to where they can satisfy a public cloud need, but more importantly, the workloads that can't be satisfied by a public cloud. They have to be in a private cage or they have to be in the customer's data center. That is the most underserviced segment of the marketplace right now. It is an opportunity for everybody in this room. If you're a reseller, you're trying to cater to that enterprise on the other end. And Also is just a perfect example of getting out in front and trying to rearrange this, because it's my opinion that the customers that move first, or the VARs, the disties, the resellers that move first, have a chance to win their unfair share of this new market. Mm-hmm. And the laggards are not only going to watch their existing business continue to be diluted by workloads moving away, but in some cases they're going to be completely disintermediated.
Okay, thanks. And I saw, Caroline, I saw you nodding your head, which is good. If she was shaking her head, that might be a bit problematic. But, you know, your take on this. I know, you know, you and I have talked about what this sort of concept of solutioning is. It's often taken very cynically, but in fact, you have, I guess, a much more sort of evolved view of that and why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started, it was more transactional, fitting a need that we knew was out there, which was getting into cloud services, you know, starting to sell cloud services as a service provider needed to evolve. But Dan's absolutely right. You know, we need to be looking at this market more from there isn't just one answer. It's not a destination. Actually, it needs to be flexible. So having something that is cookie cutter is no longer applicable. It can be cookie cutter time and time again for a similar use case, of course, which helps with onboarding times. It speeds things up. The service provider can deliver the cloud service quickly and efficiently, and that saves a bunch of cost and time. But actually, it needs to be something that can be expanded. It shouldn't be locked in. It should be something that's very flexible for the enterprise need in mind. So yeah, it's exactly right that actually privatizing elements of an infrastructure is becoming much more important. Okay. And service providers need to make sure that they understand what elements of security layers they need to put around it, how they should deliver that, you know, where it's going, how it should be maintained, and that type of thing.
Okay. And I think this point about the flexibility is interesting. Xavier, flexibility and what the consumers of the cloud are expecting. We talked primarily about the role of the partners and the service providers here. What about the role of the end users themselves, the flexibility that they're expecting? How are they intending to kind of become their own service providers?
So there is a big opportunity, and even wider than you can all expect, with the digital transformation process that is happening. because when you think of a company moving to the full digital transformation, the first thing that we do, they will use service providers, technologies, VARs, SIs, and they need to find them, by the way, in order that they can transform their business and that the outcome of their business becomes not only physical, but also digital. So take the example of an X-ray machine in a hospital. Last time, years ago, it was only a box with a price. Today, it is a box on software. Mm-hmm. So if you take the case of a manufacturer of this kind of machine, tomorrow, after they have done the digital transformation of their product, they need to find ways to propel back these products on the market. So we need to find ways in order we put not only in the ecosystem that you are mentioning, not only the different channel, SIs, distributors, software vendors like you guys, but also the customer themselves. Because when they have done their digital transformation, they become a source of revenue for all of you. Because their goods, which are now digital, can be also propelled back within your infrastructure as service providers, in order that you make more money with them. And they need the reach. They need the reach everywhere on the planet. So if you can together work in order to address this problem of the end user customer, I'm a sales guy by default. The first thing I always say to my sales guys working for me, thinks customer. And for a service provider, I do believe that if a service provider is thinking is customer, with the digital transformation effect, he can capture back a lot of business to be thread on the market.
But that then would have quite a strong implication for what we assume about the supply chain and cloud.
Oh yeah, the supply chain is absolutely changing because the end user customer in the world we see today is becoming more and more participating to the supply chain. We have seen great examples in the industry. Big giants like General Electric have done that. Schneider Electric have been embracing that. But beyond that, every single industry or services is concerned by this effect. Mm-hmm. So this is valid in every single country on the planet. Okay. So think customer, put the customer in your value chain, working with the other partners that you have, and you will create new solutions in order to do exactly what you say in our slides. Increase the volume of your outcome.
Yeah, okay, fine. So let's then delve a bit deeper and talk about, you were the first to mention money, which is good. Dan, on a practical basis then, how can new, today's service providers, channel partners in tandem make money? Some would say, well, you just resell cloud services, resell hyperscale stuff. What are the opportunities?
So this is the funnest question in our space right now. Whenever there's a managed hoster or a VAR being requested by the customer, that customer is saying, I want you to pass me through to one of the hyperscalers. That should be the big blinking light that says this is game on. What they're saying is, I know there's a new user experience and there's a new way to consume my compute, and if you can't do that, I'm going to go elsewhere. The managed service provider or the VAR in that very case recognizes that that is a workload that I may never see again. That is a control point in my customer, or in my customer I may never get back again. Now, behind that demand, there are three pillars. There is an end user who absolutely knows what they want and how they want it. There's also a very upset IT group that is saying, I'm losing control and I'm being disintermediated. And finally, there's a CFO, and in every single enterprise, there is a tipping point on an Excel spreadsheet where a CFO looks down and she says, oops, this convenience is costing us a lot of dough. That creates the opportunity for everybody here. There is an enormous amount of money to be made by satisfying all three of those pillars. One, the end user, you've got to give them that experience. That is not going to change. But two, you can give IT control back. I can have it in my own cage, in my own data center. I can have it in my own data center or at my managed hoster in a private cage. And thirdly, I can get economic savings of 50, 60, 70% back to a CFO. That is the game. There are many of these workloads that can't go to that hyperscaler. That is the game that the VARs and the resellers and the managed hosters, that move quickly can take, again, that unfair advantage and take a bigger piece of the pie as they completely restack the cards.
And so just picking up on some things you said, it sounds as if there is a need to address a number of different stakeholders within the organization in a kind of coordinated way. I mean, sell with, as we've talked about, it tends to be about relationships. People talk about, yeah, I partner with somebody in a kind of a basic way, but Caroline, building solutions, building actual partnerships in the long term, both internal and externally. How important is that then? Would you think that this is key to sell with?
It absolutely is key, but it comes down to looking at this, like you said, as a long-term play. So if you've got a partner that says, I'm looking for a solution because my customer's demanding it and it's a one-off and I just want to bundle something together and that'll do, it's not going to work out in the long term. They're not going to have the need satisfied. So it's actually about the partner and the software vendor or the hardware vendor or however partnerships are forming to meet the end user requirement. It's about understanding the end user requirement all the way through the partnerships. So even if you're at the top of the stack, you're just the software layer and you don't own the customer relationship at the end, it's still important for that kind of level to understand absolutely everything that's driving the need, whether it's financial, whether it's on IT departments needing more control, security factor, growth needs, or whether it's just a whim. Somebody wants this in their environment, which we've all experienced, I'm sure, of that kind of need. Why do you want it? Just because I do, and it's cloud.
Yeah.
Fine. That can be a genuine use case. Fine. It won't last, but fine.
Yeah.
So we need to understand it through the entire layers of partnerships.
Okay. Fine. So again, bringing it back to the supply chain side, the place of the supply chain, the relationships within that, and then developing those over time. It's a long-term thing. Okay. Well, I wanted to change approach slightly. As you can tell, I'm a European. Well, actually, as of May the 18th, is it May the 18th next year? Probably won't be, sadly. Xavier, you have the advantage of always being a European. What's your experience of your kind of ecosystem building strategies that started out as a European initiative with Cloud 28+, and you've kind of taken it globally? The reason I'm asking is because, this is the first time I've presented to an audience in the US, and whereas when you and I talk in Europe or you go to a European event, it's one of the top topics. You talk about regional aspects and European aspects. What was your experience of starting this in Europe, and how is this changing things in the US, for example? How do you see it working?
It's really an amazing story because we started Cloud 28+, as you said, it was in December 15 in Europe, and we have been very, very successful implementing exactly what was in the middle of your slide, putting the partners together in a way that we do not monetize in the center of the platform, in order to get every single partners to grow more, in order they grow on the market and build new alliances. And at the end of the year, we were, after 1 year, we were nearly 300 partners. So it was amazing because it was growing very fast. People were doing business. At that time, we started also with Ormuco to get them in the European market. And then we decided to go worldwide. And the challenge is, as you said, you may think that it's not the same thing in America than it is in APG, that it is in EMEA. I say yes, it is not the same. So what we decided to do is to have one single catalog of all the services built and consumed of all the partners, but to have 4 communities, in order that every single partner can speak loud and clear about what they are doing on top of just pushing what they had inside the catalog. And this has been phenomenal. I can tell you, the partners of Cloud 28+ have been publishing nearly 500 articles inside Cloud 28+, explaining the market, explaining hot topics like the move to IoT, the move to security, and giving to their customers a 360 degrees of what they are doing. Now, what is interesting is that the topics that are handled, for instance, in APG are not the same.
Right.
But the catalog is identical. And what has been absolutely phenomenal is that when we entered on the East Coast in the United States of America, immediately the big VAR of HP like IIS, Comport, UDT, DSM as service providers, SHI, all the names you mentioned, they said, wow, we were missing that.
Yeah.
And what has been amazing is that immediately they shifted their business, taking the opportunity of the ecosystem to discuss with the European guys who had done that, and also to offer to the European guys to make this happen with what them said they were doing.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, we've seen this elsewhere, you know, where the European model for peering, for example, has become something very interesting in the data center and the interconnect networking market, which is an interesting one. I thought, you know, I would ask you about that given that we're here. I'd like now to take the opportunity to see if there's any questions. So we've covered the business models, we've looked at the supply chain, the importance of end-to-end integration discussion, the importance of actually partnering on a long-term basis, as well as aspects of transformation, services, Europe, and so on, and how companies make money. So there's a lot of topics there. I'm sure you guys have got questions. So do we have our mic runners? Thank you. Please, questions. We've got time for 2 questions, I believe. Who would like to ask these very clever people some questions? Note I went over there, not here. But you can ask me a question if you like. Any questions? Okay. I'll ask you guys a question then. So when it comes down to it, when it comes down to making money, when it comes down to margins, revenue, building a sustainable business, 2 sentences from each of you. What are the things you have to do? I know don't make massively long sentences, but you know, reasonably sized sentences. Dan.
You have to scratch the itch. The customers know how they want to consume the compute. The reason they're not sending everything off to a hyperscaler that's offering that today is they can't. That workload can't leave. There's an enormous amount of money on just filling that gap.
Okay, thank you. Caroline.
So we feel that service providers need to really start to automate as much as possible and cut costs. That's probably one of the major areas that I feel is saving margins and yeah, like Dan said, recognizing the customer need is really crucial.
Okay, thank you. Xavier?
So first of all, increase your value by assembling the capabilities of many in order that you can jump out of your comfort zone and increase your revenue. And the second one is always think that what you sell to one of your customers will enable him to build a product that tomorrow you will be able to sell back and increase your revenue.
Great, okay, thank you. So I'm just going to check to see if this has prompted interest in a question. Please, any questions about anything you've heard? Thank you.
This is coming your way, Carol.
Good morning. You had mentioned that not all workloads can go to the hyperscalers. What are some of the key examples of those workloads, and why can't they go to the hyperscalers?
Is this a question for Dan?
Yes.
You know, I think Carolyn and I think we agree here on there are legal reasons for certain workloads. You know, some of the healthcare solutions that we have jump to mind. There are also internal concerns. Anytime you see a giant brand in the news where a whole bunch of data has been captured, there's a fear there. So there are sometimes legal reasons why they can't, but there's still an enormous amount that there's just a fear, uncertainty, and doubt about that workload. The end user absolutely understands how they want to consume it, but the company is not comfortable, or in some cases even legal, to send that out. Financial, healthcare, number of workloads that the company's not comfortable with sending out. And again, being able to satisfy that may never leave the building, but that leaves opportunity for the managed service provider to put that in a cage on behalf of the customer, or allow a VAR to stand that up at the customer site with the platforms that are available today.
All right, thank you, Dan. And with that, we are now out of time. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I hope that this has been interesting for you and that it's prompted some thinking about the place of the cell width model in relation to the opportunities available for combination of channel partners and service providers. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'd like very much to thank the panelists for sharing their thoughts on this morning's session. Thank you very much.
Take